The word finds you at a specific moment, not in anger, in that quiet tone someone uses when they've been thinking something for a long time and finally decided you were ready to hear it. Man-child. Maybe an ex said it, maybe a family member. Maybe you overheard it from across the room and recognized immediately that they were talking about you, and you didn't respond. Not because you had nothing to say, because part of you wasn't entirely sure they were wrong. Here's what nobody ever explains: the psychology underneath that word is more specific and more honest than the label itself. In 1983, psychologist Dr. Dan Kiley put it into clinical language for the first time. He called it the Peter Pan syndrome: men who age in years but stay emotionally anchored to an earlier version of themselves. The book sold over 1 million copies, not because it was flattering, because it named something people recognized in someone they knew or recognized quietly in themselves. What it never explained was the mechanism. Here's 4 of them. You were taught or just learned the hard way that needing emotions was something you couldn't show, so you replaced them with something that actually worked. Humor, distance, a change of subject, sudden anger, or just going quiet until the moment passed and everyone moved on. And it did work. It kept you functional. It kept things from getting uncomfortable for everyone around you. Dr. Philip Shaver and Cindy Hazan, whose research on adult attachment was published in the Journal of Personality and Social Psychology, found that men who grew up in emotionally unpredictable environments develop a specific reflex: deflect before you feel. Not because the emotion isn't there, because at some point letting it surface cost more than it returned. The man-child label gets applied here not because the feeling is absent, but because the access is. That's a different problem, and a more honest one. Emotional deflection isn't the only layer. There's also what happens when someone names your behavior directly. How you handled money. How you went quiet when things got serious. How you made a commitment, and then slowly, without announcement, revised it into something easier to keep. And your first move isn't to examine it. It's to establish why they're wrong to bring it up. Sometimes that's accurate. Sometimes feedback really is just control wearing a more respectable coat. That part is real and worth naming. But Dr. John Gottman, who has spent 4 decades studying how men navigate conflict in close relationships, found something specific. Men with avoidant emotional patterns frequently cannot distinguish between feedback and attack. The nervous system reads, "You hurt me," as you are being hunted. Accountability registers as punishment, because somewhere early on it actually was. That's not a character flaw. That's wiring built for a specific environment, an environment that may no longer exist. The question is whether you're still running the same defense in a situation that no longer requires it. There's a third pattern, and it's the one that does the most quiet damage in close relationships. You can be magnetic, funny, generous, someone people want around without fully understanding why. And then someone asks for something real, not performance, not charm, but actual vulnerability. And something shuts, not all at once, gradually, like a door being closed very slowly from the inside. Dr. Ronald Levant, a psychologist at the University of Akron, has spent years researching what he calls normative male alexithymia, a restricted ability to identify and express emotions that isn't pathological but learned. Men aren't born unable to access depth. They develop over time the habit of not needing to. A man in his early 40s, well-liked, successful, the kind of person who could hold a room, sat across from his partner during a quiet conversation. Not an argument, just a conversation. She asked him, "What are you actually scared of?" He laughed, then said he needed to check something on his phone. She stopped asking after that. Not because she gave up, because she understood the reaching for the phone was already the answer. He wasn't avoiding her. He was avoiding a room in himself he hadn't opened in years. But here's where I have to be honest with you, because there are two very different men described in what we just covered. One of them has wiring shaped by environments that weren't safe, and he's been carrying that without the right language for it. The other has decided that his patterns are everyone else's problem to work around. Both use the same explanations. Both sound like psychology when they talk about themselves. Both will recognize themselves in this video. Only you know which one you actually are. And underneath all of it, there's one more thing. Somewhere around the year you felt most like yourself, 22 or 25 or 28, something locked. The music you go back to, the way you read people, the things you refuse to take seriously. Everything since has been weighed against that version of you. And to the people around you, growth means becoming someone more manageable, someone who fits better, someone who's finally done becoming. Dr. Jeffrey Arnett, whose research on identity development was published in American Psychologist, found that the periods when we feel most competent, most free, most aligned, leave the deepest psychological imprint. The mind returns to those coordinates the way a body returns to posture. It's not regression. It's seeking the last place that felt solid. The problem isn't staying loyal to who you were. It's when that loyalty becomes armor against the life that's actually in front of you. If you're a man, there's a specific reason this lands the way it does. You were likely taught early, not always with words, but with what was rewarded and what was ignored, that emotions are a destination, not a road. You arrive at them when things break. You don't travel through them as a matter of daily habit. That formative wiring doesn't make you a man-child. It makes you someone whose emotional development was shaped by a very specific set of rules. Rules that kept you standing. Rules you may have outgrown without realizing it. There's a difference between a man who refused to grow up and a man who grew up somewhere that growing meant disappearing. One of them needs to look honestly at what he's avoiding. The other just needs the right word for what he already built. Some men aren't stuck. They're just still choosing. Which sign hit closest to home? Drop it in the comments. I'm curious which one lands different at this age. And if you know someone who's never had this named properly, not because they're broken, but because nobody gave them the language, send this to them. Sometimes that's all it takes. If this is the first time someone put this into words for you, there's more where that came from. Follow for more on the psychology of quiet intensity.